Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video by Fight Hub TV that I found to be very particularly interesting. And of course, for those of you that ended up watching Naoya Inoue's most recent fight this past Sunday, it really was the only main event that actually had any entertainment value when you talk about actual boxing ability, and on top of that, a great boxing fight. But I mean, at least, in terms of, a good showing of boxing ability and a really good fight as well. I mean, Canelo Alvarez versus William Skull, of course, Canelo did what he had to do to win, but I do not think that he looked that good. And of course, Ryan Garcia versus Rolly Romero. I mean, I'm not even going to bring that one up. So, I mean, shit. I mean, not only was it not entertaining, but it really was not that great in terms of boxing skills either. But anyways, continuing onward, of course, talking about Mr. Naoya Inoue. Naoya Inoue's career is going to be very interesting within these next up and coming couple of years. Because Inoue, of course, is a guy to where when you take a look at him, he passes the eye test in almost every single category. He's a guy that, of course, in my personal view, not only is a very entertaining fighter, but he's someone that is an exceptional level boxer. And I remember heading into that Stephen Fulton fight, I even myself had my doubts about whether he was going to beat Stephen Fulton. In fact, I even believed that I picked Stephen Fulton to win just by a little bit. But Inoue didn't just show me that not only did he beat Stephen Fulton and not only did he dominate him, but he had completely outboxed someone that, of course, was of that black American boxing style. Not saying that Stephen Fulton is someone that is just a complete, all around one of the greatest fighters that I've ever seen, but he definitely was a guy that was getting top 20 pound per pound acclaim and was a great all around talented and skilled fighter. So, Inoue, of course, deserves a lot of credit for that victory. I also think that he deserves a great amount of credit for, that of the Marlon Tapales match, who ended up beating MJ Akhmadaliev in the first fight. I also give him a little bit of credit over Nonito Donaire, although Donaire very clearly probably was not at the same point in his career. But the point being is that Inoue is a great fighter. But his move up to 126, or these next up-and-coming fights, whether it be against Nick Ball, MJ Akhmadaliev, not necessarily MJ Akhmadaliev that I would be as worried about, but these fights against Nick Ball, or possibly other 126 pounders, or guys like Junto Nakatani and Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, Inoue is going to have to sharpen up on some things in order to for sure really beat those guys, or in order to become the best version of himself that he can be. Now, of course, in that fight most recently against that of a Roman Cardenas, it was a very entertaining fight, but Inoue took a lot of unnecessary blows, in my personal view, within that fight. Now, apparently, after the fight, or in certain fights, Inoue has stated multiple times, and I'm going off, of someone else stating this, but I believe it because I've been hearing rumors about Inoue stating this for a very long time, and I believe that I've even heard him say himself once or twice that he wants to put on the most entertaining fight possible for the fans. And I believe that he stated that after this fight that, he could have boxed probably a little bit differently, but he wanted to put on the most entertaining fight for the fans. And, that's not the fight that people would have wanted to see if he would have fought another way. And listen, I mean, all that is great, but Inoue is going to have to be very, very careful. And I always stated this. It's very obvious that Inoue that he loves his job and that he has a great time beating people up. There's just certain people that are like that. They're the nicest people outside the ring, or at least they appear to be, and then once they get inside the ring, they're an assassin, they're a killer. That's who Naoya Inoue is. But he's going to have to be very careful because sometimes he gets a little bit too bloodthirsty. Sometimes he does not tighten up on certain things that may cost him in future fights. And that energy about I'm always going to appeal to fans and, I want to put on the greatest fight, for them and all sort of stuff, that works to a degree. But at the end of the day, you have to be very careful with that type of energy. Because a lot of these quote unquote fans that say that they're a major fan of you or state overall that they're your ride or die or all sort of stuff, once you start losing fights because of certain things that you did not tighten up on that you probably needed to, a lot of those people are going to be the first people that throw you under the bus or call you overrated because you did not live up to their image. So they're going to be disappointed and they're going to be forced to kick you like a bad habit or a drug, because that's pretty much like what being a fan or a fanboy or a fangirl is. And then they're going to state, yeah, well, he's overrated. So Inoue, once again, and he's going to have to be even extra careful because Inoue is the type of guy to where so many people, they put him on such a high level, and I think that he deserves to be on the high level, but there's so many people that you wouldn't really know who he's fighting because he's in the lower weight classes. So if he ends up losing to certain guys like Nick Ball, or if he ends up losing to Junto Nakatani or Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, especially without beating some of those other A-grade level names, what the narrative about Inoue is going to be is that he was fighting a whole lot of bums for his career, and that overall that he was always overrated until he finally fought someone good, then he finally lost. That's what the narrative is going to be about Inoue if he ends up losing to some of those guys. So once again, he's going to have to be very careful. Now, I personally think that Inoue is a boxer that can fight in really any way that he wants to. He showed me that against Fulton. He showed me it against other fighters, that when it's finally time to pull out a great and smart performance, that he can do it. But there's also times where Inoue is just too mistake prone. And not because he can't tighten up on certain things. You can tell that Inoue is smart enough to realize the mistakes that he's making. But if you're going to move up to that 126-pound weight class, you're going to have to tighten up even more. Because if you get in the ring with certain guys like Nick Ball, even Junto Nakatani, who's not at 126 but a little bit lower. But, even if you fight Junto Nakatani, Nick Ball, Bruce Shushu Carrington, these other guys, if they end up hitting you in the correct way, they could potentially end up hurting you or knocking you out, and you may not even potentially see it coming. Or it may end up a much tougher fight than what you once anticipated, and you may end up losing a slight decision because you ended up getting knocked down and you cannot end up recovering, or that fight was much tougher than what you once anticipated. I remember when Deontay Wilder, was at the peak of his career, when he was fighting his string of bums, no offense, but that's who the majority of the fighters that he fought were, other than Luis Ortiz and Tyson Fury. It just is what it is. But I remember when Deontay Wilder was doing that, and a lot of the faults that he had within his style, they were starting to show. And a certain amount of his fans were saying, well, it doesn't really matter because he has that eraser. He has that right hand. What does it matter for if he doesn't have the greatest amount of boxing skills, overall, if he has that right hand? Well, because if you're a future-orientated person, and if you realize that eventually certain things are going to bite you in the ass, and eventually once Deontay Wilder actually fought someone that could really fight against that of a Tyson Fury, it bit him in the ass big time. So that's why I say, I had this one comment on my channel the other day when I was talking about, the review of the Inoue fight. And I had this guy stating that, this narrative that Inoue needs to tighten up on some things is just a false narrative. You're just hating all this other stuff. Inoue just wants to put on an impressive fight performance for the fans. Right, that's great. But at the end of the day, he needs to be careful that he puts his best foot forward, and that overall that he makes sure to tighten up on the things and tighten up on the weaknesses that he does have. And what are Inoue's weaknesses? Sometimes he'll drop a hand when he throws a certain punch, especially that right hand, which is something that right here Timothy Bradley has showed out many, many times. Sometimes he advertises his offense. He can move his head a little bit more. He gets a little bit too overzealous in some of his fights, which causes him sometimes to get hit with punches that he does not need to get hit with. All right, a lot of these are pretty much because Inoue, feels that he is superior to every fighter that he's in the ring with. And 99% of the time he usually is. Actually, 100% of the time so far he has been. But at the end of the day, once again, he's going to have to be very careful. Because at 126, it is going to be a little bit more challenging, especially since those fighters, they're going to be bigger than you. And some of those guys are going to be legit A-grade level threats. So we'll see what ends up happening. But anyways, I thought this interview was very interesting. Timothy Bradley is going to talk about it. Let's tune in.
What did you make of it? I thought it was a fantastic performance. I thought it was, man, come on. What you think? I mean, that's what we want. We want to be entertained. You was definitely entertained. Absolutely. I thought it was a solid performance. Look, I'll tell you one thing, because, my honesty. You can't be getting hit with those shots, man.
Agreed. You cannot be going down with both hands. Now, what Inoue was trying to do, because Inoue is a master-level boxer, I have no doubt about that in my mind. Inoue is a master-level boxer. He can do almost anything that he wants to inside the ring. He's a little bit weaker on the inside range than, maybe what some of his other ranges are, but I think that that's a part of the reason why Inoue also wanted to fight on the inside. I think that any elite-level athlete or elite-level boxer always pays attention to the criticisms that are being bestowed upon them. I don't care what they say. There are certain people that, of course, say that, they cut everything out, like social media and all that other stuff. But everyone always hears the voices to a certain degree. Everyone always hears the criticisms, which I don't think are always a bad thing. I think that sometimes we do need to hear the criticisms of us. It's just that it can't be overflowing, because there's a difference between taking constructive criticisms or, taking criticisms and, on top of that, taking too many criticisms or unnecessary criticisms from people that we don't even need to hear from, like a lot of the fans or all this other stuff, and then you end up depressed and they end up getting inside your head. So that's a little bit of a different situation. But in a way, in my personal view, part of the reason why he fought so much on the inside in that fight, or so much within brawling range, is because he wanted to prove that he could brawl or fight on the inside with this guy, especially after he got knocked down. And of course, he showed that he could, but he just got a little bit too overconfident. And that is a problem sometimes with certain athletes. Overconfidence can be a huge issue. And in boxing, that is not something that you want to have, because it can lead you to get knocked out or knocked down or very, very, very badly hurt. Because if that would have been someone like a Nick Ball that knocked him down, or someone like a Shoot Carrington, there's a very good possibility that Inoue could have been knocked down 1 or 2 more times, potentially even knocked out. So he's got to be very, very, very careful about that.
That's just plain and simple. You can't be getting hit with those shots and going down like that, bro. Seriously, especially against these caliber guys. Now, this guy is a real guy. He is. Top 10 guy. He's...
Agreed. And what Timothy Bradley is really stating there is that he should have not gotten dropped by a guy that, let's be honest, is not an A grade level fighter. That's about a B or C grade level fighter. Probably B, but I mean, for that weight class anyway. Because he gave it a very good going. And of course, he was trained by Joel Diaz, who's a very, very good boxing trainer. Well, a great boxing trainer. But which interestingly enough, he used to always verbally assault Timothy Bradley in the corner. I remember Joel Diaz as a coach and as a trainer. Whenever you see Joel Diaz, this man is always verbally and mentally abusing his fighters in the corner. He's slapping them up and shit.
And ID'd, right? He can fight. He got punching power in both hands. And the way he was able to get up, I'm going to give him credit. He got up. He did the same thing he did to Neri. He broke this guy down, and he was able to get him up out of there. However, man, look, you want to go up to 126, and you want to try to dominate that division, there's some lions there, too. Dudes that can take...
Agreed. And on top of that, Inoue is going to be smaller than those guys. He just is. Now, Nick Ball, for example, he's going to be a certain amount girthier than Inoue, but he is definitely also not going to have the height or the reach over Inoue, so Inoue is going to have to probably take advantage of that. But, I mean, the point being is that these guys, they're not going to fuck around. And especially since you have such a high profile, they're going to be looking for any weakness that they can possibly take advantage of. And it appears that that dropped right hand is a major weakness that Inoue ends up having. So he's going to have to really sharpen up on that. And even throughout the fight, it was very obvious that he knew that he made a mistake about that, because he was putting his right hand to his face even at the beginning of the fight. But once he thought that this guy was going to be easy and a cakewalk, he went in there with both of his hands down. He was trying to set it up with the lead hand, but then he dropped his right hand. So the guy just threw an overhand left, then landed right on top of Inoue's face, and it knocked him down. He ran right into it.
Yo, stuff. You remember, he's a small guy. He's a small guy moving up, man. It's
Agreed.
Challenging for him. The guy tonight was like, he really didn't hit that hard with the single punches. It was more of the...
Well, I actually think that he hit pretty hard. But the point is that Inoue is going to be fighting guys that hit harder than him, especially if he's moving up the weight class. And I'm not stating once again that Inoue is taking the move up in weight, lightly. He's a very smart dude, and he realizes usually the type of threats and challenges that he's in with the ring against. All I'm stating is this. Take heed, because, if you end up doing some of this stuff, especially dropping both hands or dropping that right hand, or end up getting a little bit too overzealous, you can end up getting knocked out, bro. And I don't care how many of these fans claim that they're your fan or all this other stuff. They will start to turn on you once you start losing some of your big fights, or if you do, because you get knocked down in a fight or something like that. Watch how fast these people will turn on you.
Cumulative effect, more of a, the combinations in this.
Because at the end of the day, fighters are remembered and athletes are remembered about, did they win in the biggest of moments, and did they win their big fights? At the end of the day, there's only so much that is going to go about, oh, well, that guy was always entertaining. That guy always gave us a great fight. That's great. But those types of people are usually never remembered amongst the all-time greats in terms of the top 10, top 20, top 30, top 50 fighters of all time.
speed at which he punch you. You know what I'm saying? It's frustrating. It's blazing fast. It's accurate. It's on point. It's tough to deal with. However, you saw, hey, there's moments where you can take advantage of Inoue if you know them. You have to know them. You gotta have.
Agreed. Which is why Inoue is gonna have to work harder and work smarter in some of his fights about not showing weaknesses and just being defensively responsible. Now, I think against MJ, he's going to be sharper because what Inoue has shown me in the past is that he fights to the level of his competition and that he doesn't fuck around when he believes that the guy, could potentially be a big fight or is going to be a threat. But still, he needs to watch out.
Film study, you gotta know and recognize him. However, fantastic job, great finish, and he's different. He a beast. As long as
he definitely is different. Inoue is up there with some of the greatest athletes for a boxer that I've ever seen. He's up there with guys like Rocky Marciano. Now, certain people may say, why would you say Rocky Marciano? For people that don't know, Rocky Marciano was basically like a human version of a Terminator. The man never got tired, had power, had A-grade level power. The man can knock you out with any punch overall at any given moment in time. He was known for running 15 miles a day, hitting like a 300 to 320 pound heavy bag for like 3 hours, which of course, if you've ever done that, it wears out your shoulders, your arms and everything, So, I mean, Rocky Marciano was a freak in nature. He really was. Of course, Muhammad Ali up there, Roy Jones Jr., Prince Nassim Hamed, other guys like that. He's just, Inoue is up there in terms of, fighters that would have been created in a lab. He's a freak in nature. He has blazing speed, just super, super destructive power. But the level of power, it may also start to go down or not be as effective once you move up the weight classes. So all the more reason, to sharpen up your skills and make sure that the defense is a little bit tighter.
He got blood, like any heart and blood running through his veins, and his heart is pumping. Y'all in effing trouble. Anybody.
And Inoue definitely is a type of guy that, he loves that type of fight. I think that Inoue, truly believes. Now, I'm not in Inoue's mind, but just if I had to guess, Inoue's the type of guy to where sometimes he believes that some of his challenges are a little bit too easy. And I think that that's why, he kind of thought that this guy was just going to roll over once he started to retreat. It didn't happen that way. So he got knocked down, and once he got knocked down, he got a little bit more motivated, and he said, all right, I'm going to show this guy truly, what I'm about. I'm going to show this guy what's what. And then, of course, he laid down a beatdown, although Roman Cardenas still had his moments after that, but still, Inoue, got to be careful.
Hearn said that he doesn't belong on the pound for pound list about 6 weeks ago. What do you make of them comments?
Ooh.
Eddie Hearn said that Inoue doesn't belong on the pound for pound list.
I don't care. That's his opinion. I don't really care what Eddie Hearn
Is he the pound for pound number one in your opinion?
Who, Inoue? After that performance? No, I would say no. I don't think he's pound.
And listen, that's not something that is non-justified. Listen, at the end of the day, if we're going to criticize Terrence Bud Crawford or Canelo Alvarez or certain people off of a performance, like I criticized Crawford, for not doing super well against Israel Madrimov, against a fighter that had only 12 fights and all sort of stuff, Inoue does have to be criticized for getting knocked down and losing a couple to a few rounds against a fighter that, really no one had ever heard of before. So he is going to have to get criticized for that. But I mean, right now, I just don't see anyone surpassing Alexander Usyk right now as the number one pound for pound fighter. You're talking about a guy that was just recently able to defeat Daniel Dubois, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury. All guys that are 20 to 60 pounds bigger than him at the very least. And then on top of that, they're all taller and lengthier than him, and way bit more than him. And they're relatively skilled for the heavyweight division, especially Tyson Fury. And he was able to pretty much embarrass all of them, or at least, beat Tyson Fury well enough to the point to where he won 2 times. That was something that was never supposed to happen. Like I said, that would have been like if Evander Holyfield would have actually beat Lennox Lewis of his day. Never happened. So once again, and certain people may debate, if Tyson Fury was just as skilled as Lennox Lewis. I mean, all that's well and good. But the point being is that, any of us that know boxing, Tyson Fury at his all-around best, he is an exceptional level boxer for a heavyweight, and Usyk was able to beat him. So we have to give Usyk a lot of credit, especially with the size differential. So right now, Usyk has to be the number one pound for pound fighter. After that, it's kind of between Crawford and Inoue right now. And then after that, I'm, probably Dimitri Bivol and Canelo Alvarez and certain guys like that. But we'll see what ends up happening there. But anyway.
I think that Usyk is number one pound for pound.
As do I, Timothy Bradley. Thank you. And that's one of Terrence Bud Crawford's best friends saying that right there. All right. So it is what it is. Now, of course, a lot of people will say that Timothy Bradley is a quote unquote company man, but Timothy Bradley has also argued hard for his boy about Terrence Bud Crawford. So I mean, it is what it is.
And I think Crawford is behind him, and I think Inoue's number 3. I don't care.
That's the exact same order that I would have it.
How you guys have it, you pick your poison, but that's what I predict. That's what I think. So, but at the end of the day, great performance, fantastic show tonight.
Well, it was a good performance or a great performance after he got knocked down. But at the end of the day, it was a little bit sloppy from Inoue. That's just how it is. But the reason, of course, why I give this criticism is because I expect more from Inoue. And on top of that, I'm just a guy that's very honest. I'm not going to pussyfoot around, certain performances. It was not, a immaculate performance from Inoue. Of course, no boxer ever has 100% immaculate performances. But at the end of the day, Inoue is going to have to do better than that against a higher level competition. But his next fight is against MJ Akhmadaliev. Many people allege that he is an A-grade level fighter. I'd probably say he's about A-, kind of right there with DePaulis. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. But anyways, let's see how that fight goes. I expect Inoue to be better and more technically sound within that fight and sharper than what he was within this fight. So we'll see.
My gosh, Espinoza and Inoue saved the weekend.
Before I let you go, real quick, Bill Haney said to Dan Rafael that he doesn't have a clue what he's talking about.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it for this little interview. I just thought that was very interesting. And Rafael Espinoza, that dude, of course, is a danger as well. And to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure if Inoue is going to be able to beat someone like Rafael Espinoza. And it's not that, Inoue, in my view, is not more skilled than him or does not have the skills to pay the bills. But Rafael Espinoza is seriously going to be about 2 weight classes bigger than Inoue. And he's so lengthy and so tall for that weight class. I've already stated that dude is a weight bully for that weight class. Like, you're 6'1" fighting at 126. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, get out of here. But the fights that I would love to see would be Inoue, of course, versus MJ, which is going to be happening next. Inoue versus Nick Ball. Inoue versus Nakatani. Inoue versus Rodriguez. Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez, of course. Inoue versus that of a Espinoza, perhaps, eventually. And, of course, Inoue versus a Bruce Shoo Shoo Carrington. It'd be very interesting to see if they would have a title fight between a Bruce Shoo Shoo Carrington and a Rafael Espinoza. And if Bruce Carrington can win that title, then we'll see if we can get Inoue and Carrington in the same ring. That'd be very interesting. I'd love to see that fight. But anyways, Inoue's got to be very careful because these guys are going to be legitimate A-grade level names. He has a lot of A-grade level names ahead of him, including Nick Ball, Bruce Shoo Shoo Carrington, in my view. He also has, who else there? Rafael Espinoza, possibly. Junto Nakatani, and Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez. He has a potentiality to beat every single one of those guys. But he's going to have to make sure that he's at his best and at his sharpest to beat all those guys. So we'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.